Have you ever thought about pivoting into the cybersecurity space or just wanted to understand a little bit more about what's top of mind for leaders in this space? Then you'll want to tune into this episode as I interview a director of cybersecurity, and she shares her insights as to how she pivoted from accounting into the cyberspace and what is top of mind for leaders right now. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of The Leader Within. Today, I'm excited to introduce Priscilla Kosseim, a cybersecurity director with over a decade of expertise in enterprise risk management, IT improvement, and internal audit. She excels in leading strategic initiatives, addressing information security challenges, and driving innovation. Given her experience, I'm excited to have her share her insights with you. Well, welcome, Priscilla. Can you share with us a story as to what has shaped the trajectory of your career, whether it be an aha moment or it's like, man, if I could do this over and over and over again to help me thrive, this is what I would do.
That's a very interesting question. And thank you for having me today, Angela. I really appreciate you taking the time to create a space like this, to invite professionals to share their experience and reach out to the community in ways that we might be able to help. So, on your question, it's quite interesting because my background is in accounting and I work in cybersecurity. So the reason I went into accounting was because of my uncle. So my uncle owns his own accounting company. And I just thought, well, my cousins aren't interested in taking over. Why not? It seems like a great trajectory, safe path. I've always been good with numbers. I enjoy problem solving. So it was just one of those pathways that just seemed logical. And I'm someone who really depends on logic in order to make any type of decisions. So I kind of went through that path, and throughout my career, it was interesting because I got one of the partners back at one of my old firms who reached out to me on LinkedIn asking me if I would be interested in working in consulting. So as part of your audit hours, when you're doing your CPA, you need to accumulate a certain number of hours in different categories. So I had already started working in tax with my uncle. I needed some audit hours that were a little bit more pushed and some assurance as well. So I thought, why not? This could be a great opportunity. And I had no idea, and now in accounting programs, they're a lot clearer about it, but I had no idea back then that you had this whole consulting stream that encompass those three streams, those three principal streams, but from a consulting perspective, from a risk management perspective. So it's what we call the non-traditional route in accounting, and it seemed very interesting for me. It was kind of new. Like I said, it wasn't something that was mentioned in schools as heavily as it is today. Or that was as prominent. So I was doing audits and then moved into IT audits and then full-fledged cybersecurity evaluations. And I just developed a passion for it that just kind of clicked, that aha moment of, this is something I could really see a full-fledged career path in. So when I had one of the recruiters from CGI reach out to me about an opportunity to work with their team, it was definitely scary. I did not feel that my competencies aligned with the job, but it's one of those things that as women, we tend to really look at job postings and think, well, everything needs to check out for me to apply to it. And I've heard this a lot, I'm sure you have as well, but when men apply to jobs, it's usually one of those 50% fit, 50 to 60%, and they do apply to the position. So I kind of took the chance. I said, why not? Let's go for it. Let's see. And if I fail, well, then at least I'll have learned something. And I've thrived. I've learned so much. I've been able to get very technical in my job. But it all came down to the passion to develop, the passion to learn. And that's what I tell anybody who's trying something new. So I have a lot of friends who jumped into the consulting world, actually into the cyber world with no experience. And I tell them exactly what I had to learn throughout is that you don't need to have studied in the field. You don't need to have a certain reach or a very long lasting career in that domain in order to apply to it. The only thing that you need is discipline. You need to be open to learning. You need to put in the hours, and you need to really thrive in what you're doing and develop that passion for it. And I've seen so many others like me who have thrived in things that they haven't studied in, but developed passion.
I really appreciate those call outs, right? Because I think the common theme that I've noticed in any leader, any industry, similar to what you had said, is like that passion, curiosity, and just willingness to figure it out are essential, especially with the rate in which information and everything is changing, right? And I'm curious from your perspective, what do you think helps your profile stand out to that recruiter for them to be like, hey, Priscilla didn't need to actively sell herself for us to kind of reach out to her. Instead, this stood out. Like, did you ever find that out?
I've been told so many times that your LinkedIn should reflect that elevator pitch. So if you were to be in an elevator with somebody and you had 30 seconds or less to sell yourself, what are the key points that you would throw at them that would highlight who you are, that would impress them? And that's essentially how I look at my LinkedIn page. It's exactly that. In my career, to be honest, especially at the beginning, I never said no. I've always taken challenges and learned through the different elements. So, especially in risk, a lot of people will specialize in risk. So, for example, they'll just do enterprise risk management, or they'll just do change management, or they'll just do even in cybersecurity, you have certain specializations that you can do. So whether it's IGA, so the identity governance and access, or it's cyber defense, or it's GRC, so governance, risks, and compliance. So there are different elements that you can specialize in. I've never wanted to specialize, and I've never shied away from a challenge. And I think that's what differentiates me when people look at my CV, because I think my CV now is like 100-paged in terms of projects, because I've never said no. But it's what diversifies me to be able, now my CV is kind of thrown around on everything because it fits for every type of role that clients ask. Obviously not the full expert in terms of an implementation, but generally for advisory, for reviews, for evaluation, some types of implementations, and some types of even general management. My CV is kind of a fit all right now. The way that I've developed it and the way that I never shied away from a challenge. I'll even give you an example. One of my past bosses, there was a project up north where we literally had to figure out the energy that was being exerted from machinery, heavy machinery, during different seasons. So for example, when you have snow, you have additional weight that's added towards the machinery, how they're exercising energy, so on and so forth. I've done like one, maybe two mechanical engineer courses as part of my college degree. It was not a specialization of mine. And yet I was sold as an expert in the domain to be able to accompany other experts. Thank God there were some engineers on the project. But in order to accompany them and do the evaluation for the client. And, as new as the topic was to me and unfamiliar, if I look to my left, I've literally kept every single book, I think from high school and on. And I went to go buy some more. I'm somebody who doesn't, like I said, shy away from a challenge. So I picked up books, I reviewed my formulas, I reviewed a little bit how you do those types of measurements, and I applied it for the client. I did become an expert within a week, so to speak, in order to perform the tasks required. So a lot of it is just a will to learn, because it's if you have that drive to do it, you can learn anything. It's like when you go to school and you want to learn something new, whether it's computer science, whether it's political science, you want to learn about what's going on in the world in terms of politics, you want to learn about legislation changes. It's literally opening up Google, looking at news outcasts, it's looking at articles, it's picking up books, it's listening to podcasts, it's talking to industry professionals, and then just applying it, following a team to learn and to apply it. So anything's a learning curve, and doesn't matter what age you are, young or older. If you want to do it, you'll do it.
I really appreciate the story. And one thing I wanted to kind of dive deeper into is when you talked about how you chose not to specialize. And then in a day and age like this, I don't know if you've ever encountered this where you're like I actually have like this broad set of expertise and skill sets that are applicable specifically to whatever context, but the ability to sell that broad skill set and expertise within a domain is actually one of the most difficult challenges you can make, right? Because it's easier to be like, I'm a tax expert, or I'm like I don't know, I think you mentioned like IGA or something like that, right? I'm an expert in this. But for you, how do you position your brand, whether it's as a leader or professional, to be like, hey, I may have a broad skill set, but this is the value that I can create so that you can ultimately position yourself for success, right?
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, there are positives and negatives on both sides, right? So if you specialize in something, there are positives because you know exactly what you're doing, you're an expertise in that domain. But it's a bit of the same thing. Like if I take IGA, for example, you might become a specialized expert in IGA, but you'll be a specialized expert maybe in certain products, not all products. So what if those products don't become leading products anymore? What if you don't learn the new products? What if you um, don't stay up to date on even some of the changing requirements? So what you might become an expert in might no longer be as relevant. Same thing for its priority for clients, right? So IGA right now and since 2023 has been a priority for clients. But maybe by 2026, 2027, other priorities might emerge. So you see, for example, right now, AI is a big buzzword. Is it still going to become or still remain a buzzword? Are they still going to be requiring people in that domain? So there are pros and cons in becoming a full expert in one element versus you could still stay an expert in one domain, but it's important to kind of diversify or at least have knowledge in other domains. So I know, for example, some IGA folks who have learned how to do risk management or risk assessments. So they're not just on one side of the fence, they can do other elements as well. There's always one thing that we're a little bit better at. Like for me, it's evaluations, it's audits. Obviously, it's my background, so I am better at it. Doing evaluations for M&Es, for example, I'm better at it. So mergers and acquisitions. But it doesn't mean that I cannot know other topics enough to hold a conversation and be able to also perform and do tasks in them for clients.
And do you have like something that you anchor back on then to be like, hey, like, yes, these are the things that I can become well versed in, or these are the things that I'm extra well versed in. But like, yeah, what's your anchor point? Because like, for example, like workforce transformation is a huge like domain, right? And for me, I always have to lean back on whether it's change management or HR so that people can be like, okay, I kind of can put you in a box now, right? To further the conversation. But yeah, I'm curious for you if you have an anchor point that you can be like, okay, this is what level set that conversation from a branding perspective.
Yeah, that's a great point. For me, it's knowing the trends. So everything that's changing in the industry and being up to date on it. It's also knowing my standards, knowing legislative changes as well. So, for example, I'm very well versed in ISO 27001, in COVID, in NIST, and even things like high trust. Like I know my standards quite well, like the back of my hand. But I also know some of the legislative changes that are coming about. So Law 25, for example, in Quebec for privacy requirements. So I stay up to date on certain elements that become my anchor because those are things that we need to be well versed in security, no matter what element you're specialized in. And when you know those, it becomes almost a point of conversation with clients.
Appreciate that. And speaking of clients and trends, what would you say is like one of the biggest challenges that cybersecurity leaders are facing right now?
Oh, well, as ourselves, and then I'll mention maybe as a company, but as ourselves, it's staying up to date. The threat landscape is always changing, especially since the pandemic. It has grown exponentially. It has become, for most industries, the number one business priority for clients in terms of focus. That, and I'm hearing AI is growing as well. So it's staying up to date on the threat landscape and the solutions to adhere to them, or the processes to adhere to them, or the people aspect. to adhere to them and to really be able to manage those strategies for clients as best as possible, and understanding the different levels of architecture that might evolve as well in terms of the market. So that I'll say as a professional is kind of the element I'd focus on. But as a company, it focuses a little bit on the same thing, but it's kind of always being first, right? It's understanding, well, what's going to be coming on the market that'll be first, that we could essentially focus on, that we could really push to our clients and really understand what their future needs are. So it's doing that proper market analysis to understand kind of that changing market from a threat landscape, yes, but also from an industry business priorities in terms of clients. Where are they shifting, and understanding that and trying to create strategies in terms of solution development, service development that would make the most sense for them and to stay ahead of the curve. And that is very difficult to do as a company, because and we've seen it over the years, whether it's cloud services, right? So we always see the cloud services shifting. So Google was leader, and Oracle took a bit of it of its place. Azure took place, then Amazon kind of creeped in. So they're always kind of shifting in terms of who is the leader, and it's going to be that way forever, to be fair, because it's competitive edge. So we saw Google, for example, putting all of their eggs in one basket, and it didn't focalize the type of attraction that they were looking for. Now they're shifting their focus and going a different direction. So every company's struggling with that. It's always a question of understanding what's going to be next and trying to adhere to the market as best as possible.
And when it comes to that prioritization and understanding what's best for your situation, because like you said, there's a lot of buzzwords, there's a lot of different trends, right, that are out there, and it can be overwhelming for a company sometimes to be like, okay, what do I need to do first? Then next, right? So from your perspective, like, if a company can't afford like a firm, what is like a framework for decision making to help them be like, okay, this is how I should prioritize this?
That's a great point. So it really depends on what topic, but generally you want to look at what your business objectives are and understand what are the risks that you're more prone to understand then, well, do you have the right controls in place or not, in terms of your people, process, and technology, to understand essentially, well, what are the priorities that I should focus on from a technological perspective. So it's always an alignment. It's always understanding what you're at risk to. And it doesn't mean because company A is at risk of ABC that you'll have the same risks. The risks are, think of it like owning a house. Whatever your risks are in terms of your house, whether it's repairing a roof or being by a beach and having that risk of a flood, or salt decay or anything like that. It's really dependent on your location, your property, your security, so on and so forth. So it's very particular from house to house. Even if you might have the same neighborhood, so same industry, there are still very particular risks from home to home basis that clients need to be aware of.
And from that risk perspective then, because you want to be able to put in place like certain controls and measures, right? But how do you do so in a way where you put that in place, but also promote innovation, right? And the ability to kind of effectively fail and come out and actually have a conversation around that.
So we hear this comment a lot in security, and I think it's starting to annoy a lot of us, but it's not a question of if, it's a question of when you get attacked. So before even addressing innovation, companies should at least understand that they have the basis of protection that they need for their industry. If they don't, then your innovation is kind of mute. Because you can't innovate if you don't have the security behind it, and you're going to get attacked every 5 seconds. Especially if you have something very big from an innovation perspective and you make the news. Any news online is not necessarily good news. It's a point of attraction. Same thing for when there are political comments that are made by a nation. Our critical infrastructures, our main elements or our main medias are the ones that will get attacked first. So it's not necessarily a good thing when you're online in terms of news or broadcast if you don't have the right protections for your company, for your industry. And it's not just protections in terms of controls, it's also understanding if you have the right insurance, because we all know at the end of the day, you can't control every type of risk. And having the right level of insurance, especially with the changes that occurred in 2023 for insurances, so having the right cyber insurance for your industry is just as important, because the aftermath can be just as critical for an industry as the first part of your controls and your preventative measures.
Okay, and speaking of that threat piece, right? Because like having gone through a cybersecurity attack myself and another company, I know the impacts on operations, right? And so from your perspective, where do companies go wrong from being proactive? I know more companies are trying to be like, okay, we need to put a strategy in place. But that in itself is constantly evolving. But again, like, yeah, have you seen from a strategy perspective where it's like, hey, this is a common element that is missing from your like overall business strategy, and that's why this is happening, right?
I'm not going to say this in a generalized manner, but more often than not, what we've noticed is that industries don't know what their critical assets are in order to be able to protect them. So when we're talking about critical assets, it's elements that hold literally the core of your enterprise. So whether it's IPs, whether it's any type of data, really, it's understanding what are those critical assets, where they're located, what type of controls are around them, what type of elements do you have to detect any type of breaches or elements of attack in those areas. Are they up to date? So it's really that, I'd say, more often than not, that leads to issues and concerns, because if you don't know what you're trying to protect in your industry, what's critical to you, you can spend a lot of time kind of jumping around from one end to another. I'd probably say second part, it's not understanding or not doing the proper exercises, I should probably say, in terms of your incident response. So we have a lot of companies that will draft an incident response playbook, but they won't practice it. They won't see if it actually works. So when it comes time to try it, it's usually in an emergency situation, and it doesn't always go the way everyone planned. And that's not when you should be figuring out your best playbook. It's that becomes a very reactive methodology. There are other elements, but I'd probably say those are the ones usually we see. Now, it's not a standard for all. There are a lot of very individualized risks per companies, and that's why we very much encourage companies to do strategy assessments to really understand what they have, what they need, and where they're going.
Love that food for thought. And I'm going to switch gears a little bit and focus more on the people side of things now. So being in the cyber world, I know it's almost like a 24/7 thing, right? Like, especially depending on your industry, if it's like there's a lot of like it depends, right? That gray area. And I know just across the board, mental health in the workplace and well-being is at an all-time low. So from your perspective, what's top of mind for you as a leader, and what have you noticed as leaders to kind of make sure that we're not burning our people to the ground as we're managing all this change, right?
Yeah, change management's a big part of that, right? Because we all, and I'd probably say there's always been an aspect of mental health, but mental health changed when we started working remotely. So now that we're connected online, it's almost that people think that because you're home, you should be more available. So if you're sick in your home, you should still be working. You're home and you're taking care of your kids, you should still be able to respond. It's after working hours. While you're home, you should still be able to respond. There's that mentality, that shift in mentality that I'd say every company is trying to readjust and trying to flip. And I know at CGI, we have a program called Oxygen, and people talk about it a lot in terms of, helping employees, for them to really understand the tools that they have at their disposal, whether it's mental health professionals that they could call. We make sure within our team that we have a point of connection, that we can, talk to each other. We have champions, health champions that are there to help us and to guide us. But it definitely was a shift, being able to work remotely. There were a lot of advantages, but there were a lot of disadvantages, because people then believe that you should be available 24/7 because you're connected from home, versus when we were at the office, you were only connected between your working hours, sometimes a little later, but it really was just limited to your working hours. So, I'd say that shift is still ongoing for a lot of companies, and trying to understand, how to adjust that. Same thing with hybrid mode, trying to adjust the return back to work, understanding those complexities of now, I'm in my office right now. I can speak as loudly as I want. So my home office. But if I'm at work, how do you essentially go back to, working next to your peers, having all that noise around you, right? There's a certain adaptation period that companies are undergoing and trying to understand as well, and trying to guide everybody to. So all of that is part of change management and understanding the culture. And it's important to do that, because like anything, and we practice this when we go see clients, you cannot just do a quick shift in solution, a quick shift in a program, a quick shift in an architecture without, talking to the people, understanding what their needs are, making sure that you're applying it, and doing a slow integration and doing those check-ins along the way. That culture part is super important if you want to retain your best people, or all your people, I should say, and also make sure that the mental health aspect is continuously prioritized through those changes.
And I'm curious, like for you, how do you create that safe space that allow that feedback to come out, right? Because I've learned that there is an art to it and there's a science to it, and not everyone has understood how to do it effectively. So yeah, again, for you, because of your consulting and your leadership background, how have you created that safe environment to elicit feedback, not just from the loudest person in the room, but all the voices?
That's a great question. And I mean, at work, we have our health champions, but it doesn't mean that everybody feels comfortable going to talk to them. So it's each person's responsibility to have their door open no matter what's going on, so that other people feel safe to talk to them. And, my door is always open for my teammates, for my peers, if ever they need to talk about something. It doesn't mean that everybody feels comfortable talking to me particularly, and that's okay. But as long as they feel comfortable talking to somebody, that's what's important. And so as long as everybody opens their door for anybody who does feel comfortable talking to each other, that's what's important. And very often it's not a question of finding an answer, finding solution for somebody. Sometimes it's just giving them way to talk, and that they feel listened and that they feel heard. And sometimes that in itself is enough as well.
Yes, I totally agree. That heard and seen piece, I think, is absolutely critical, and not really being quick to just give a solution all the time, not knowing if that's what they're even looking for. And as we slowly wrap up our conversation, when it comes to unleashing the potential of individuals and organizations, what do you think it takes?
I think it takes support from all levels within an organization. I have learned that your voice is unique and you should be using it. It doesn't matter if you're at the bottom of the echelon or you're at the top of the echelon, or you're somewhere in the middle of it. If you have a voice, you should use it. There is a way to use it without being, disrespectful to your peers, but your voice is yours and you should use it in order to ensure that everybody feels supported along the way and achieves what they're looking to achieve.
I appreciate that. And my last question to you is, what is one thing that you're working on that you're excited about?
Ooh. So I've been excited about this for a while, but I do 20 yearly challenges for myself, where I have my top 10 elements that I'd like to accomplish in the year. So right now, one of the top 10s that I have been learning is sign language. It sounds like a very small goal, but I have my top 10 goals that I'm always very proud of accomplishing at the end of the year. And this is the one I've been excited to kind of add on and get to as part of my achievement. So I know 10 signs up until now, not to say that I'm very far, but I'm getting very excited to be able to kind of push that along, because I think it's important from an accessibility perspective to be able to demonstrate to peers and to future people in our organization and also outside of our organization that we can create an accessible space for anyone.
I respect that. And I learned sign language like just a little bit like in my last career or whatever it may be. And I can't remember, is this thank you or something like that? But like there's
Thank you.
thank
Yeah.
you. Okay. Yeah. I was like, there's like please, and then like I
Yeah, I'm
remember
learning like
hungry,
the sign for family, and
family.
there's a few
Yeah.
signs I'm writing right now. I'm no expert. I'm
Yeah.
literally at 10 signs known, but
Yeah.
it's my 2024 challenge. So by the end of this year, I'm hoping to be just a little bit more further than I am right now.
A lot of respect for that, and that's a really great call out on just because you're putting yourself out of your comfort zone to learn this new skill and keeping that accessibility and inclusivity in mind. I think that's very respectful. So thank you for your time and sharing your insights, Priscilla. I really appreciate it. And to everyone else that's tuned into another episode, thank you so much for your time and attention. It means more to me than you'll know, and I can't wait to stay in touch with you on my next episode. Till then, stay safe.